And now we welcome Miss Janet Moreira, NIL attorney, brand attorney, and a woman who specializes in trademarks as well. Janet, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, George. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
So, this conversation surrounding NIL and the transfer portal and what's going on in college football is obviously dominating the news. And there are so many people that are like, oh my God, college football is broken. These kids, they should be playing for the love of the game, Janet. They should be playing for the love of the game, not for money. When you hear that as somebody who understands branding and trademarking and everything else, what does that resonate with you?
Well, I think you can love the game and play it for the love of the game and also get paid.
Yes.
You know,
Just like the
that if you
coaches. They're
yeah,
coaching for the love.
just like everybody else involved in sports, right? It seems to me like the only people who've been missing out on a piece of that pie has been the student athletes whose backs these programs have been running on. So I think this is about time. And, I think to say that they should not be compensated and they should do it for the love of the game is sort of ridiculous, to be honest.
And one of the things that the word that comes to mind when I hear that argument is un-American. Because in America, we love capitalism, we love a free market, we
100%.
love all of
Right.
these things, but for some reason when it comes to our college athletes, we want them like poor, destitute and everything else when I've looked at it like that everybody has a finite amount of time like in their life there's going to be some 5-10 year period that you're going to make the most money that you ever did, and it could be in college, so why would you not be able to capitalize on that?
I couldn't agree more. I mean, we do live in a capitalist society where entrepreneurship is valued, it's celebrated. So why would we take that opportunity away from student athletes? But the good thing is that that is shifting, as we know. So I think we're headed in the right direction with a long way to go.
So well, part of that headed in the right direction. It's expected to be approved. The NCAA House Settlement that they
Hmm.
came up with. It was basically unilaterally compared to like the big conferences with the smaller conferences, but people believe that that's going to fix the issue. Can you enlighten people on what the House Settlement actually is, what it means, and then we'll get into the implications.
Well, the house settlement really relates to a payment of funds relating to athletes that played during a certain period of time and basically compensating them for their playership during this time. I think that what it fixes is this issue of compensation for name, image, likeness. Right. That's the issue that it fixes, and then it gives the schools an allotment of money to put towards their athletes moving forward. Right. The things that it doesn't fix are things like the rights of students in terms of getting injured. What happens if a student gets injured to their scholarship? So I think that there's plenty of issues to be dealt with that have not been dealt with the settlement. However, it does begin to compensate student athletes in connection with their name, image, likeness.
Okay, so what is the current injury situation if you get hurt playing football, water polo, basketball, baseball, whatever, and you have lingering injuries that either force you to stop playing or that linger after your career is over?
Well, as far as I know, there's not any provision that relates to that, right? Students can lose their eligibility, students can lose their scholarship because they're not performing. So that's something that actually can be negotiated in advance when you're talking to these schools, but it's not something that is dealt with by the NCAA or in general. It's on a case by case basis.
So so right now, if you get hurt and you have a lingering injury, like nobody else is responsible for that, because in pretty much everywhere else in life, right? If you get hurt at work, there's workers' comp. If you get hurt when you're in the NFL, there's a mechanism for a workers' comp situation. But if you get hurt making millions for everybody else in college, you're just asked out.
Yeah, pretty much. It's a problem. I mean, you can have a student athlete who's on the field busting his butt, and then you can have someone there on a music scholarship, right? And if
Yep.
that music scholarship recipient gets hurt on the job, there's ways for that student may have the rest of their scholarship to enjoy. That's
Mm.
not true for student athletes. So it depends on the school, but that is a problem that needs to be addressed. Is taking care of these students holistically, not just when they're playing, but what happens to them in the event of injury and after they're done with their sport.
So this sounds like that athletes need to be employees of the universities, and like would that be better in terms of for the student athletes, and would it be better for the universities?
Well, the universities are probably going to say that it's not better for them because there's going to be additional obligations put on them as a result of having these student athletes as employees, right? They're going to be held to a different standard. They're going to have maybe tax obligations, other obligations relating to the payment of benefits relating to the student athlete, which they can avoid at this point, right? But I think overall, I think it's going to be better for the student athlete. I think there needs to be some sort of representation, just like most professional leagues have a players association. I think there needs to be an active collegiate level players association that is looking out for the best interests of the student athlete and negotiating on behalf of the student population. So I think in terms of benefits to the students, I think those are great if they do become employees.
Yeah, so if they are made employees, how do you think that that would impact the NIL situation now, right? Because there's a big, the news cycle is being dominated with the news of Nico Iamaleava and his situation at Tennessee. Like,
Right.
if they're employees, would it then be harder to move around or transfer portal or have, non-compete clauses or buyout clauses or things like that that are typically found in other work contracts or sports contracts?
Well, I mean, that I think is all part of what would happen in a negotiation as part of whatever the players association is and whatever the governing body is for colleges. Who knows if the NCAA is going to be around to do that or if that's going to be on an individual conference level. But I do think that those are all questions to be asked as part of that negotiation. And of course, we want the carve out to be NIL because that is a student athlete is more than an athlete. And when they're going to college, they're playing on a field, they're doing their job. Their job is to play their sport, right? But things that come along outside of that that may be related but are not directly related. NIL is part of that, right? Student athletes are becoming popular because they're great marketers. They're typically good students. They have a passion for something. All of that relates to marketability. So
Yeah.
it's not just their performance on the field. It's so much more. There should be a carve out for that, obviously, that allows them to market themselves and also play the sport and have some flexibility in doing that.
Yeah, can you talk about the difference between NIL and pay for play, right? Because what
Mm.
is being under the guise of NIL right now is probably a lot of it is pay for play right now. So, can you explain the difference between those two pieces?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of different buckets that people kind of put everything that relates to NIL into, right? So there's now going to be this sort of revenue stream that comes directly from the school, right? That's one area where NIL can come from. When the student does something for the school directly in terms of marketing or selling jerseys or something like that. That's one area.
Yeah.
Then there's the collective, right? Which historically has been pay for play, although they've worked around that, right? Um, but that is one area that NIL has traditionally fallen into. Then there's this area which is really what NIL is, and that's endorsement deals. That
Yeah.
is a real brand having a contract with you, telling you what needs to be done in order to promote that product or service, and then you do the thing. So there's these three areas that NIL has sort of lumped all together. But I think in terms of collectives, collectives historically have been pay to play. They don't want to say that, but that's what it's
Yeah,
been. You a bunch of boosters give money to the school in order to attract talent so that the talent can do for the school what they want them to do, right? Win a championship or whatnot.
yeah,
So collectives have fallen in that category. I think there's still a place for collectives because collectives offer money to a school program, right? And that's wonderful for these school programs. I think that's going to be significantly more regulated. I think there's a place for them. I think with all of the changes that have happened with regard to the NCAA, a series of lawsuits, all of these things have transpired in the last really 5 years. um, they have become, at least with some of the bigger conferences, more legitimate in terms of having contracts,
yeah.
setting up programs within the school in order to sort of funnel these deals through. So I think there is a place for collectives. I think it's just going to look more formalized than what it's been.
The thing I believe that where Tennessee's being demonized by some people, Nico's being demonized by a lot of people. This is the NCAA's fault. Like starting with the Ed O'Bannon lawsuit, they could like the writing was on the wall that are eventually going to have to pay these players, and then you lose Austin versus the NCAA. You just keep legal defeat after legal defeat. And then until California proposes, what was it, AB 216 or AB 214, whichever it was,
Yeah.
and then that was the initiation for a state saying that players can make money. Then Florida
Hmm.
came in, and Ohio, other states. I just don't understand where the leadership of the NCAA spent $100+ million fighting against this when it was painfully obvious that you needed to be forward thinking instead of like trying to drag your feet and keep this antiquated system going.
I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I can't believe it's taken this long, to be honest with you. I mean, it's crazy to me, um, just the fact that so many people have been profiting off of college athletics, except for college athletes, and
Yep.
and we're prohibited from doing anything outside. I mean, really having nothing to do with the sport. If someone wanted to become a YouTuber and make money off their name, image, and likeness because they were a gamer who also happened to play athletics,
Yes.
it was prohibited. I mean,
Yep.
and you would lose your eligibility over that. I mean, it's just crazy to me. So I mean, the NCAA doesn't get any credit, in my opinion, because they've been reactive the whole time. The only reason why they're making changes now is because they've lost. This wasn't, out of the kindness of their heart or them trying to be progressive. This has been a reactive situation because they've been sued over and over again, and
Yeah,
so
but
have made
have they
policy
done enough
changes.
though? Have they done
No.
enough to kind of get ahead of things? Because it looks like they're just throwing their hands up at the stands, like Congress, help us. And so I no longer believe that the NCAA is capable of handling this. Do you believe that the NCAA is still capable of handling it? And if so, what do they need to do to get back in front of things?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I think what has to happen at this point is the NCAA, to continue to prosper, is to have support from federal legislation. I think right now we're sort of in this gray area. There's a patchwork system of laws, every state now. This starting with the O'Bannon suit, then California's fair pay to play, then there were a series of lawsuits against the NCAA. There's now this situation where we're in a gray area. People don't know what's happening, what law applies. I mean, to have a patchwork of state laws dealing with this situation, you could have a person who's a resident of one state playing in
Mm,
another state, doing an endorsement deal in a third state. What law applies, right?
ooh,
You got to, yeah, it's a situation, right? Because a lot of these kids have residency in a different state than the state that they play in.
yeah,
So
yeah,
I
because they
think,
because they are technically like on the school's books, they're paying out of state tuition, so they're not a resident of the state.
right. So this sort of thing there needs to be something that creates a uniform system so that people know what to expect and they have a set of rules to abide by. I think if that occurs, then the NCAA can be in a place to enforce that, to be a place to look for guidance, to be a support system rather than an enforcer of its own rules. That's where I see the NCAA coming into this.
Can they move swiftly enough when stuff goes wrong? Because uh, when it comes to money, oh yeah, they can move real swiftly. But when it comes to anything else, they drag their feet. So can they be nimble enough of an organization to really deal with these issues as they come up? Because Alabama doesn't have the same needs as Wyoming.
Yeah.
Wyoming doesn't have the same needs as UC Davis. UC Davis doesn't have the same needs as Syracuse. Syracuse doesn't have the same needs as USC. So I guess I'm just wondering. And then the sports don't have the same needs. Football provides
Totally.
money for every other sport, and there are a few other sports, at different universities that do make money, but very few. So football's needs are completely different. So football, should it be taken out and taken separately, being that the NCAA doesn't even doesn't award their champion right now anyway?
Right. I mean, again, I think the NCAA, in order to stay relevant, is going to have to going to have to take a really good look at themselves and figure out, what do we do to stay nimble, to be flexible, and to support the conferences, the sports, however they create their organizational structure to do that. They're going to have to figure it out if they want to stay relevant. Otherwise, I, there may not be a need for them moving forward. Now, I would like to see them again, sort of being a support system rather than an enforcer, because
Yeah.
traditionally they've just been enforcing rules, right?
Yeah.
Not going to the schools to support them in what they need in order to make their program successful. I would like to see them move more to a supportive role and figure out how they can support the schools, different, athletic programs, um, figure out this clearinghouse situation, which I think is a mess at this point. Um, but that's what I see in sort of with the NCAA.
Okay, so as we go forward,
Yeah.
you are a parent of a son that is going to be a Division 1 college football player. And talking to all the parents out there, what are some of the things that, if you do have a kid that's looking like he's going to be a college athlete, or she's going to be a college athlete
Yeah.
regardless of the sport, what are some of the things that parents need to do to prepare for their NIL, and prepare for what's coming up?
Well, I mean, yes, thank you. I do have I have two student athletes, one who's in middle school, one who's in high school, who you mentioned, who's getting some attention from Division 1, big conferences. And, one of the things that I look at as a parent is looking at the institutional rules, right? So right now I have a high schooler. So I'm looking at the Florida High School Athletic Association rules, right, to determine what he can and cannot do at this point. Looking at rights of publicity laws in the state of Florida. I think as a preliminary matter, you have to understand what rules apply to your student athlete, right? And figuring out, if you don't know what they are, finding someone who can help you navigate that.
Yes.
Because you don't want to do something that's going to impact eligibility, right? Um, I think in terms of questions that I would have for programs that we're looking at, right? I'm going to ask about collectives and how transparent they are. What are the program rules for that? I'm a lawyer, so I can read a contract. I would
Yeah.
expect a contract, right? I think that's one thing that has sort of been missing historically from collectives, is having no contract whatsoever, or having a contract between the collective, there's no regulation over anyway, and a student athlete. I mean, we saw this with Rashada, right? There
Yep.
was an agreement between him and a collective that really wasn't enforceable, right? So
Yeah.
or in a lot of instances there's no written contract at all. So looking for what the deals are, looking at vague or promised payments. You know, all of these things need to be in writing. Unless something's in writing, there's nothing at all,
Mm,
right? I think looking for agents who actually have certification and legal knowledge. There's a lot of people coming into this space right now
mm,
who purport to be experts in the space. I mean,
yeah.
NIL is new. Rights of publicity are not new. Okay. Endorsement
Yes.
agreements have been around forever. So, someone that says that they know something about NIL and has never done an endorsement agreement for a brand, I would be wary of that. Right. So, looking at the right experiences, looking at someone who has contract experience to help, looking at lawyers. I mean, not everyone wants to have pay for a lawyer. I have seen a lot of people come through who um, didn't get a lawyer at the outset and then want to try to fix something after they've signed a deal. That is very difficult to do, right? You always pay for it. It's whether you pay for it at the beginning or you
Mhm.
pay more for it at the end, but
Yeah.
you're always paying for it. There's
So,
always,
so
so
where would a parent find a lawyer competent to understand a lawyer can read a contract, but not necessarily every lawyer understands the nuances of the collectives,
100%.
college football, and of the actual market. That's why you have lawyers in entertainment, some in real estate, some
Yeah.
in different fields. It doesn't mean that they're bad lawyers. It just means that their expertise lies in a different bucket. So,
Yeah.
where would a parent find a lawyer to that's competent and knowledgeable in this space?
Well, I mean, I think, I would say that I'm knowledgeable in this space, right? So
Yeah.
you can find me. But also, I would look for lawyers who have a specific expertise in negotiations with regard to brands, right? So trademark lawyers are in this space because they deal with brands all the time.
Mm,
They're not only looking at a brand deal from the perspective of, protection, enforcement, scalability. There's all sorts of things that trademark lawyers do in terms of endorsement deals. Having a specific niche in entertainment or sports would be great. Having contract expertise, excuse me, and then also some litigation experience, right? Because a lot of times contracts have disputes, right? So
yes.
having an understanding of what typically gets argued about or typically what gets disputed is helpful as well. I think looking for trademark lawyers, contract lawyers with specific sports experience or entertainment experience. Again, contracts relating to sports and entertainment have been around for hundreds of years. If we think about Michael Jordan, if we think about, people on Wheaties boxes, these are all
Yeah.
endorsement deals that have been around.
Yep.
So people with that experience that can be applied to this new class of entertainers and sports figures being student athletes, it's very easy to transfer those skills. So that's what I would look for.
Mm,
And also agents too, who are helpful in this space.
yeah. And when a kid gets his first NIL deal, how important is it to have an LLC or an S corp or something like that to try to run money through to obviously you're not a tax advisor, but
Yeah.
to run the money through there instead of running it through the individual.
Well, I mean, I think there's always a benefit to having some sort of entity set up, right?
Yeah.
I don't know that it has to happen with your first NIL deal, but I think just like any business, when you run NIL like a business, which it is, right? NIL is a business. Um, just like any other business, you want to do the right things to set up your business to maximize the value of your business. Certainly,
Yes.
setting up some sort of entity, corporate entity, is going to be helpful to that. Certainly, setting up your domain name so that no one can misappropriate your domain names is
Mm,
essential to that. Setting up your trademarks is essential to that. There are things that you have to do. Getting a tax consultant. NIL money is not free money, right? So you're going to have to pay taxes on that. So doing all of these things, just like any other business, is essential to setting up your NIL business for success.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
When we're looking at the collectives as a whole, and then they're going to be in house and there's still going to be third party deals. Um, what should we be believing that's out there? Because people and agents and all of these stuff, they put out these wild numbers and they seem unrealistic, right? um,
Yeah.
you'll see, this quarterback signed a $12 million deal. He's going for $5-6 million a year and $8 million a year and all of this stuff. And I think it gives people a false reality of what the market is. What do
Hmm.
you believe that the market is compared to what's being reported? Not necessarily in dollars and cents,
Yeah.
but do you believe a lot of these reports that come out of these astronomical figures?
Well, I definitely don't believe everything I read. So there's that. But I would say that a majority of NIL deals are not these seven-figure deals, right? These are smaller deals. There are local establishments that are setting up something with a local student athlete. Um, I think the majority of deals are not these big number deals. We're getting the reports of these big deals, which I think is actually it's creating this system where I think that everyone believes that they should be entitled to a seven-figure deal, right?
Yep.
That's not the case, right? Now, again, there's something to be said for doing things to set up your business in a way that makes you marketable, right? That sets you up to be able to be prepared for these deals should they come, but not everyone's going to be getting a big deal out the gate, right?
Yeah.
So I think there are some of those happening. Majority, I would say 90% are not those big figure deals. But I think what I would suggest is that if you want to set yourself up for any deal, is that again, you treat your marketing as a business, you treat your social media as a business. Brands are looking to your social media immediately before they look to see whether they want you to be a brand ambassador. So, does your social media reflect something that a business or a brand can buy into, right?
Yep.
Um, and I think that if you do certain things to set up your NIL as a business place, then you will open yourself up to more opportunities that maybe potentially down the road could lead to these bigger deals. But I don't think that I don't love the sensationalism that surrounds these big deals, making people believe that everyone's entitled to them.
See, I think it's the secrecy, right? That it's the secrecy that creates this scarcity, and that
Mm,
somebody else is getting something that I'm not. And that's one of the things that makes NBA, NFL contracts, easier for the players to stomach,
mm,
because they know what's true and they know what's not true. Now, mind you, I don't think that necessarily it's the best idea for the kids, for college athletes, for their numbers to be out there. But I do think it's necessary for the appropriate people to know what's true and what's not true. Because now as a parent, I can say, man, that was reported as $4 million. This dude's getting $750,000. Now I can be more content and happy with my situation, instead of wondering, am I the fool that that is getting lapped? And I think that that's causing some of the problems right now in college football.
well,
Well, in
I mean, I
basketball
think,
too, to be honest.
well, and I think it depends on which bucket of NIL money we're talking about here. Is this an NIL collective bucket of money, or is this a brand to direct to athlete bucket of money? Right?
Oh,
Because that's going to,
they're thinking it's the school or collective to athlete
yeah,
money.
right. I mean, that's going to depend on, that's going to depend on, I do believe what you're saying is true. There should be transparency around that. And that might be where this purported clearinghouse is going to come in, right?
Yeah,
Is that there's some way to record these deals. Number one, it keeps everybody accountable, right? Which I think
yeah,
is very important when you're talking about NIL collectives. Like there should be a registration system for these so that NIL collectives are held accountable. Everyone knows what their obligations
yep.
are. Schools are held accountable. and then we can all move on from there. And it's transparent, and it gives it, there's a level of comfort that has historically been missing with regard to collectives who have been, operating in the dark essentially. I think all of that needs to come through this sort of new world that we're creating. There needs to be transparency, accountability between the NCAA, schools, collectives. That's going to level the playing field, right, so to speak, with these big programs and athletes. And I think that's what it's all about. These students should have as much support as possible. They are delivering the performances that are driving the revenue for these schools.
Yep.
We should absolutely level the playing field here.
100%. And you guys, she is Janet Moreira, attorney at law. So make sure that you guys go hit her up. And if you have any questions surrounding NIL, if you have questions surrounding branding, and Janet, can you tell the people where they can find you and what
Yes.
services that you're offering?
Okay, great. Well, you can find me on Instagram at the NIL attorney. And you can find me online at caldera.law, and that's CALDERA.law. In my Instagram page, you can find a way to schedule a free consult. So if anyone needs a free contract review or just has some questions, there's a way to contact me directly and set up a free call.
All right. Well, you guys take advantage of that the way you're not taking advantage of. Janet, thanks for coming on the show. Appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.